Have you ever had that one family moment where the turkey is barely carved and someone decides to swing a sledgehammer straight into your chest with a single question? Yeah, that was me last Thanksgiving, sitting at my parents' dining room table with the good china out, cranberry sauce shaped like the can still ridges, and my mother, sweet as pecan pie, looking me dead in the eye and saying, "Your sister's wedding was just wonderful. When's yours?" The room went quieter than the moment before you drop your phone face down. Forks froze midair. My brother-in-law pretended to choke on a roll so he could look away. My sister, the newlywed, actually winced. And I, 34 years old, single for the first time in my adult life after a divorce no one in this house had fully processed, just smiled the kind of smile that hurts your face and said, "Already had mine." You could have heard the gravy cool. That's the story I'm going to tell you today. The real, raw, ridiculous, and ultimately redemptive story of how I got married at 26, divorced at 33, and then, 1 year later, sat across from my mother at Thanksgiving and dropped the most awkward truth bomb our family table has ever survived. And how, against every odd, that moment became the best thing that ever happened to all of us. Let's go back to the beginning, because nothing about this story makes sense unless you understand who I was when I said "I do" the first time. I was the good kid. Straight A's, church youth group president, scholarship to a Christian college, the whole package. My family loved to brag that I never gave them a day of trouble. Translation: I was terrified of disappointing anyone, ever. So when I met Caleb at 23, a worship leader with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and a testimony that made girls cry in the front row, I thought I'd hit this spiritual jackpot. He pursued me like we were living inside in the Cole Nordman song. Late night talks about purity and mission trips and how many kids we'd adopt from Uganda. My mom cried the first time she met him. My dad shook his hand like he was receiving knighthood. 6 months later, he proposed on a beach at sunset with a ring he'd prayed over for years. I said yes before my knees hit the sand. The wedding was everything Pinterest promised it would be. Mason jars, burlap, a unity candle that actually stayed lit, 300 guests who all assured me I was the most radiant bride they ever seen. I believed them. I believed everything. I floated down that aisle, convinced I was stepping into God's perfect plan. The photographer caught the exact moment I looked at Caleb and thought, this is what forever feels like. Forever lasted 4 years. The first crack appeared on the honeymoon when I joked that I might want to keep my last name professionally, and he laughed, but not in a ha-ha way, in a "that's cute, but no" way. I told myself it was pre-wedding nerves. The second crack came when I got accepted into a graduate program 2 states away, and he said, "I think God's calling me to stay here and plant a church." I told myself, sacrifice is holy. By the time I realized the cracks had become canyons, I was 29, childless, and sleeping in the guest room of the house we'd bought, because the master bedroom felt like a crime scene of broken promises. He didn't hit me. He didn't cheat, that I know of. He just slowly, systematically convinced me that every dream I had outside of being his wife was rebellion against God. My master's degree became a distraction from ministry. My friends were worldly influences. Even my therapy, which I started secretly, was a lack of faith. The last straw was when I found an email he'd sent our pastor asking for advice on how to break a spirit of Jezebel in his wife. That wife was me. I left with 2 suitcases and my dog in the middle of the night. The divorce was final 13 months later. I was 33, starting over in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like old pizza and new freedom. And that's where we pick up last Thanksgiving. I hadn't planned on going home. I'd spent the previous year rebuilding. New city, new job, therapy 3 times a week, learning how to be alone without being lonely. But my sister was getting married the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and my mom laid on the guilt thicker than giblet gravy. It's her only daughter's wedding, you have to be there, family heals everything, etc. So I flew in Wednesday night, rented a car, and prepared to smile until my face cracked for 5 straight days. Thursday morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by trophies and posters of boy bands who are now divorced themselves, and realized I was more nervous about lunch than I had been about my own wedding. Because now I had to face everyone who'd been at that wedding, everyone who'd toasted to our godly covenant, everyone who'd watched me promise forever and then break it. I walked downstairs in leggings and an oversized sweater like armor. My mom hugged me too hard and whispered, "You look thin." Translation, you look like divorce agrees with you, and I don't know how to feel about that. Dad gave me the half hug, back pat combo he reserves for people he's scared to break. My sister, Sarah, now 8 months pregnant and glowing like a dang angel, squealed and dragged me to the kitchen to show me her seating chart. And then came the question. We were elbow deep in sweet potato casserole, the men outside pretending to care about football, when Mom wiped her hands on the apron she's had since 1998 and said it. Your sister's wedding was just wonderful. When's yours? I don't know if it was the lack of sleep or the fact that I just spent $200 on therapy learning to use my voice, or the sheer absurdity of being asked that question while literally stirring marshmallows into yams, but something in me snapped in the gentlest way possible. I set down the spoon, turned to her, and said, calm as you please, already had mine. Sarah dropped an entire stick of butter. Mom blinked like she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. What, honey? I already had my wedding. Summer of 2017. You were there. You cried during the mother-son dance, even though there was no sun. The kitchen went so quiet I could hear the oven timer counting down like a bomb. Mom's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not, I mean, when are you getting married again? And there it was. The real question, hiding behind the first one like a coward. Not, are you happy? Not, how are you healing? Just, when are you going to fix this embarrassment and give me another wedding to brag about? I could have gone 100 directions. I could have cried. I could have raged. I could have made a scene that would have gone down in family lore forever. Instead, I laughed. Not a mean laugh, a real one, the kind that starts in your belly and surprises even you. Mom, I'm not a software update. There's no 2.0 version coming. That was it. My one wedding. And honestly, it was beautiful. And it was mine. And it's over. And I'm okay with that. Sarah, bless her, recovered first. She picked up the butter, tossed it into the potatoes, and said, well, my wedding will have better cake anyway. We all laughed then, even Mom, eventually, though hers was more of a nervous titter while her worldview recalibrated. But the moment that changed everything came later that night. After dinner, after the dishes, after the cousins had passed out on the couch and the men were snoring in recliners, Mom found me on the back porch wrapped in one of Dad's old Carhartt jackets, staring at the same stars I used to wish on as a kid. She sat down next to me without asking, handed me a mug of decaf, and sat for a full minute. Then she said, voice small, I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know. I worry. I want you to have what your sister has. The husband, the babies, Mom, I cut in gently. Sarah's marriage is beautiful, but it's not the only kind of beautiful there is. She was quiet again. Then, when you left Caleb, I thought you'd made the biggest mistake of your life. I nodded. I thought so too for a while. But watching you this last year, you laugh different now. Louder, like you mean it. And I realized maybe he was the mistake, not you leaving. I started crying then. Not the pretty kind. The ugly, snotty, grateful kind where you can't get words out. She pulled me into her side like I was 10 again and let me soak her sweater. I'm proud of you, she whispered into my hair. I should have said that first. Before the wedding stuff, before anything.
I'm proud of the woman you are right now, exactly like this. And that was the real healing, not the Instagram version with sunsets and scripture overlays, the kind that happens on a cold porch in a jacket that smells like motor oil and unconditional love.
The next morning, I woke up convinced the porch moment had been a dream. Some kind of turkey-induced hallucination where my mother turned into Oprah for 5 minutes. But when I shuffled into the kitchen in my reindeer socks, she was already at the stove flipping pancakes and humming In Christ Alone off-key like nothing had happened. Except she looked over her shoulder, smiled at me, really smiled, and said, "Blueberry or chocolate chip, Beatty?" Blueberry. Always blueberry. She remembered. That set the tone for the rest of the weekend. Careful, deliberate kindness on both sides, like we were learning a new dance after years of stepping on each other's toes. We didn't talk about the divorce again directly, but everything was different. She asked about my job without the usual follow-up of, "But don't you want something more flexible when the babies come?" She let me mash the potatoes without hovering to make sure I added enough butter. She even laughed, actually laughed, when I told her my dating app profile says, "Divorced, dog mom, allergic to passive-aggressive worship leaders." Saturday was the wedding. Sarah's wedding was the opposite of mine in every way that mattered. Outdoor vineyard, November chill, 75 guests instead of 300, taco truck instead of plated chicken, and a bride who wrote her own vows without asking a single soul for approval. I stood up there as maid of honor in a burgundy dress that actually fit, watching my hair twisted up with baby's breath because Sarah said, "You always look pretty with flowers in your hair." And no one corrected her to say real women over 30 don't wear baby's breath anymore. When the officiant got to the part about "let no man separate what God has joined," I waited for the familiar stab in my gut. It never came. Instead, I felt light, like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't know was stuffy. At the reception, Aunt Linda, patron saint of backhanded compliments, cornered me by the charcuterie table. "You look so good, honey. Really? I wasn't sure you would after everything." She waved her hand like my marriage had been a small house fire instead of a Category 5. But God restores, doesn't he? I smiled, popped a cube of cheddar in my mouth, and said, "He restores. Sometimes he also removes. Different tools, same carpenter." She blinked twice, excused herself to go find the bathroom, and I never saw her again that night. Victory. Later, when the dance floor was sticky with spilled margaritas and the string lights made everyone look 10 years younger, my dad found me sitting alone, watching Sarah and her new husband Josh attempted two-step without maiming anyone. He sat down, handed me a glass of champagne I hadn't asked for, and said, "Your mother told me what you said yesterday, about already having your wedding." I braced. "I owe you an apology too." He went to the grave convinced I'd failed you somehow. Thought maybe if I'd been harder on Caleb, or taught you more about red flags, or, hell, I don't know, prayed the right prayers. But watching you this weekend, I realized the failure was not yours or mine. It was his. And maybe the church's. Definitely the church's. I almost dropped my glass. My dad has attended the same Southern Baptist church since 1978. He still calls the new worship songs 7-11 choruses, 7 words, 11 times. Hearing him criticize the church was like hearing the Pope question transubstantiation. "He read your blog," he added quietly. I did drop my glass then. Luckily, it was plastic. "You have a blog?" 3, actually. Anonymous. Well, I thought they were anonymous. Apparently, you can just Google "daughter, divorce, worship leader, Jezebel," and I'm the first hit. He laughed, a deep rumble I hadn't heard in years. "I deserve that. We all did. I'm sorry we made you feel like your pain was a PR problem for Jesus." We sat there while some Ed Sheeran song played and people slow danced badly, and I cried together for the first time since my goldfish died in 3rd grade.
After the wedding, I flew home to Nashville with a leftover slice of tres leches cake and a heart that felt strangely spacious. Like I'd spent years living in a studio apartment and someone had knocked out a wall I didn't know was load-bearing. But the next few months, something wild happened. My family started treating me like a whole person instead of a cautionary tale. Mom texted me recipes without adding, perfect for feeding a husband. Dad sent me articles about narcissistic personality disorder with no commentary, just a simple, thought you might find this interesting. Sarah FaceTimed me from her honeymoon to say, Josh says you're my new hero because you left a man who tried to control you with Bible verses. He thinks that's metal as heck. And then in March, I got the call that changed everything again. It was Mom, crying so hard I thought someone had died. Mom, breathe, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, she sobbed. I just got off the phone with Mrs. Jenkins from church. You know, the one who always asks when you're going to settle down again? I braced. I told her, you already did once, and the man turned out to be a horse's patootie, and that God's got bigger plans for you than being some man's doormat with a ring on it. I'm pretty sure my soul left my body. You said horse's patootie to Mrs. Jenkins? And then I told her if she brought it up again, I'd start asking when her son is going to stop living in his basement playing Fortnite at age 37. I had to sit down. My mother, who once washed my mouth out with soap for saying crap, had just gone full gangster for me. That was the moment I realized the Thanksgiving bomb hadn't just cleared the air. It had started a revolution. Over the next year, Mom became the most unlikely divorce doula on the planet. She started a secret Facebook group for women in our church going through separation. No pastors allowed. She bought every book Lisa TerKeurst ever wrote and highlighted them like a seminary student. She even confronted Caleb's parents at Kroger when they tried to corner her about forgetting and forgetting so I could come back to the fold. I wasn't there, but the text she sent me afterwards is framed in my office. They said you were the best thing that ever happened to their son. I told them, no, he was the worst thing that ever happened to you. And if they didn't stop rewriting history, I'd start telling people why you really left. They bought their milk and left pretty quick after that. My dad, meanwhile, took it upon himself to become the dad every hurting daughter deserves. When I had a panic attack the first Mother's Day after the divorce, he drove 4 hours to sit with me on my couch and watch Bridgerton without complaining once about the costumes. When I started dating again, he only asked one question. Does he make you feel safe? When I said yes, he said, good. Bring him for Christmas. I'll only clean the shotgun if he's late. And Sarah had her baby in July, a little girl with my eyes and Josh's dimples, and named her middle name after me. Not the sister who stayed and played by the rules, the sister who burned it all down and built something better. Last Thanksgiving, exactly a year after the original incident, we all gathered again at my parents' house. Same table, same china, same cranberry log rolling onto the plate like it was auditioning for a horror movie. Mom passed the rolls, looked around at all of us, Sarah and Josh and baby Ellie asleep in a bouncer, Dad carving the turkey with surgical precision, and me in the same seat as last year, and said grace. When she finished, she added, and Lord, thank you for closed doors and second chances and daughters who are braver than their mothers ever were. Then she looked straight at me and said, pass the butter, my already married and perfectly whole daughter. I cried into the mashed potatoes. Nobody minded. That's the real ending. Not that I met someone new. I did, but that's another story. Not that Caleb apologized. He didn't, but his new fiancé left him 6 months later, so the universe has jokes. The real ending is that I got my family back. The version that sees me. All of me. The girl who wore white and meant it, and the woman who walked away when forever turned into a cage. Sometimes healing looks like a second wedding. Sometimes it looks like never needing another one. For me, it looked like Thanksgiving dinner, a mother who finally spoke the truth out loud, and the sweetest words I never knew I was waiting to hear. You already had yours, and it was enough.
The comments started rolling in the minute the video went live. I've never hit the subscribe button so fast in my life. Finally, someone said it out loud at the family table. I'm sobbing into my sweet potatoes and it's only 9 a.m. I'm a 52-year-old man, and this is the most healing thing I've watched since my own daughter left her abusive husband. Thank you. Within 48 hours, the video had 2 million views. Within a week, it was at 12 million. Messages poured in from women who'd been called Jezebel for wanting a career, from men who'd stayed too long because God hates divorce, from teenagers terrified to tell their parents they were gay because the last person who came out got prayed over like a demon possessed them. I read every single one until my eyes burned. Then the invitations came. Podcasts, conferences, publishers. A speaking agent slid into my DMs with the smooth confidence of someone who smells money. We can get you a 6-figure deal in 2 weeks. You're the voice this generation didn't know it was waiting for. I told her I'd think about it. Then I closed my laptop, walked to my tiny balcony, and threw up over the railing. Not because I was ungrateful, because suddenly the most private pain of my life had become content, and I wasn't sure where the scar ended and the brand began. That night, I called my mom. I'm scared I'm monetizing trauma, I told her, voice shaking. Like I'm about to become the thing I hated, those influencers who cry on cue and sell journals about it. She was quiet for a long time. Then, baby, when you left Caleb, you didn't do it for likes. You did it because staying would have killed you. If telling that story now keeps one woman from staying until she's dead inside, then tell it. Just don't let them make you perform it. So I set my rules. No sponsored devotionals, no divorce glow makeup tutorials, no posing with my dog and a caption about how God turned my mourning into dancing while hawking teeth whitener. If I spoke, it would be raw. If I wrote the book, it would include the ugly parts. The nights I almost went back because the silence in my apartment was louder than his yelling ever was. The publisher still offered 6 figures. I took it, but only after I made them put in the contract that I could say shit as many times as the story required. While I wrote the book, life kept happening in the hilarious, brutal way it does when you stop trying to control the narrative. I started dating Ben in February, the guy my dad approved of because he opens doors and doesn't quote scripture when you're mad at him. He's a high school history teacher who swears in front of his students exactly once a year so they know he's human, and makes a chicken piccata that makes me weak in the knees. Our third date was supposed to be a nice Italian place downtown. Instead, we ended up in the ER because I slipped on ice and fractured my wrist trying to look cute in heels. He held my hair while I puked from the pain meds and proposed, sort of, in the hospital bed. Not now, he said, kissing my good hand. But one day, when you're ready, I'd like to marry the hell out of you. I laughed so hard the nurse threatened to sedate me. We moved in together in June. He brought 2 cats and a collection of vintage maps. I brought a box of journals labeled evidence for the prosecution. We turned the second bedroom into an office with 2 desks facing each other because we both work from home on Fridays and like to make faces across the room when Zoom gets boring. Some nights we cook together and dance to Stevie Wonder in our socks. Other nights, one of us ends up on the couch because I'm crying about something that happened 4 years ago, and he's learned that fix-it mode doesn't help, only I'm here does. He's never once asked me to be healed before I'm ready. The book came out the following November, exactly 2 years after the Thanksgiving incident. We titled it Already Had Mine. No subtitle, no promises of a 5-step plan to your dream life, just the story, plus every text message, prayer journal entry, and desperate 2 a.m. voice memo I could find. It debuted at number 2 on the New York Times list. I threw up again. The book tour was 20 cities in 30 days. I signed books for women who waited 3 hours in line with toddlers on their hips. I hugged men who whispered, I'm the Caleb in someone's story, and I'm trying to change. I FaceTimed my mom from green rooms while she held up baby Ellie so I could read her Goodnight Moon between interviews. The last stop was Nashville. Hometown show, sold out. They told me 1,200 seats. I walked out on stage, and there, front row center, was my entire family. Mom, Dad, Sarah, Josh, Ellie in a tiny noise-canceling headset holding a glitter sign that said, "That's my auntie." I lost it before I said a single word.
After the reading, I did Q&A. Someone asked, "Do you ever wish you could go back and not marry him at all?" I thought about it. Really thought. No, I said, because if I erase that marriage, I'd erase the woman who learned to leave, and she's my favorite version of me so far. The applause was loud, but the loudest sound was my mom whooping like she was at a Luke Bryan concert. That night, we all went back to my apartment. Too many people for the couch, pizza boxes everywhere, baby asleep in a laundry basket because the pack and play was still in the car. At one point, I looked around and realized this was the family photo I'd always wanted, only it didn't look anything like the one I'd planned at 26. No matching dresses, no forced smiles, just us, scarred and loud and alive. Later, after everyone finally left and the apartment was quiet, Ben and I stood on the same balcony where I'd once dry heaved over sudden fame. The city sparkled below us like it was proud. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my head. "So," he said, "are you still allergic to weddings?" I laughed, turned in his arms, only the kind where I lose myself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple rose gold ring with a tiny sapphire, my birthstone, set flush so I could still type without it catching. I stared at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. "Ben, it's perfect, but I need you to know if we do this, I'm never going to be the wife who says, 'Happy wife, happy life.' Some days I'm gonna be a mess. Some days I'm gonna need you to remind me I'm not Jezebel. I'm just having a human day." He slid the ring on my finger anyway. Good, because some days I'm going to burn dinner and cry at diaper commercials when we eventually have kids. I'd like a wife who can handle my mess too. I kissed him so hard we almost fell over the railing. We got married the next spring in the backyard of the house we just bought. 30 people, string lights, and a taco truck because traditions are nice but tacos are better. I wore a short white dress and cowboy boots. Sarah did my hair with baby's breath because apparently I was wrong about women over 30. My dad walked me down the aisle, got 2 steps, and started bawling so hard Josh had to take his other arm to keep him upright. We wrote vows that included the words, "I promise to fight fair. I promise to go to therapy even when it's my turn to be wrong. And I promise to always let you have the last slice of pizza. Unless it's Hawaiian, then all bets are off." When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Ben dipped me like we were in a rom-com and whispered, "Round 2, baby." This time, forever feels different. Not because we're perfect, because we're honest. And this Thanksgiving, we hosted for the first time. Same cranberry log because chaos is heritage. Same people, plus Ben, and a 6-month pregnant me waddling around in a baby-loading apron my mother bought me as a joke that wasn't a joke. Mom raised her glass at dinner and said, "To close chapters, new chapters, and the bravest daughter I know, who taught me that love doesn't always look like we thought it would." Everyone cheered. I looked around the table at the family that had once accidentally broken me and then intentionally helped put me back together, stronger, truer, louder, and I smiled the kind of smile that doesn't hurt your face at all. Then I leaned over to Ben and whispered, "I changed my mind. I'm glad I already had mine, because it brought me to this one." He kissed my temple and said, "Welcome to the sequel, Mrs. Thompson." And for the first time in my life, I believed in happily ever after. Not because it's perfect, because it's mine.
The baby came screaming into the world the following October, exactly 1 week before the 3rd anniversary of the Thanksgiving that started it all. We named her Ruth Ellis Thompson. Ruth because she was born during harvest season, and because the story of a woman who left everything familiar to follow someone into an unknown future felt fitting. Ellis, after my grandmother, who once told me, "Never marry a man whose potential, marry his character, or stay single." Advice I wish I'd heeded the first time. The labor was 31 hours long and ended with an emergency C-section after her heart rate dropped during a contraction. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles while they prepped me, terrified, and Ben holding my hand so tightly I thought he'd break it, whispering, "You've already survived worse than this. You've got this."
When they lifted her up over the curtain, all slippery and purple and furious, I started laughing and crying at the same time because she looked exactly like my baby pictures, only angrier. They laid her on my chest, and she stopped crying instantly, just stared at me with those stormy newborn eyes like she was saying, "Took you long enough." Ben cut the cord with shaking hands and then rested his forehead on mine and said, "Welcome to the team, little girl. Your mom's the toughest person we know." We brought her home to the little blue house with the creaky porch swing, the one we bought because it had a magnolia tree older than the neighborhood and a kitchen big enough for chaos. The first night she slept 4 hours straight, and we panicked, convinced she was dead, until we tiptoed in and found her swaddled like a bolillo, mouth open, snoring like a drunk sailor. That's when we knew she was definitely ours. Motherhood after spiritual abuse is its own kind of reckoning. Every time she cried and I couldn't fix it immediately, the old voices tried to crawl back in. "You're failing. You're not enough. Good mothers have it together." But therapy had done its job. I could hear the lies now and name them. I would pick her up, breathe her in, that impossible newborn smell of milk and heaven, and whisper, "We don't do shame in this house, baby girl. We do try again tomorrow." Ben was off work for 6 weeks. We lived in a blissful, exhausted bubble of takeout containers and middle-of-the-night dance parties to Fleetwood Mac so she'd stop screaming. He changed every poopy diaper without being asked, and only cried once when she gripped his finger for the first time and he realized she already trusted him completely. My own mother came for 10 days and slept on our couch, even though we offered her the guest room, because babies need their grandmas close. She did laundry at 3 a.m., made biscuits from scratch, and never once gave unsolicited advice. The closest she came was the morning Ruth projectile vomited across the kitchen, and Mom, covered in curdled breast milk, looked at me and said, "Well, she's got your dramatic flair." Then she laughed until she wheezed. On the 10th night, Mom found me on the back porch steps, pumping milk in the dark because the sound machine inside was too loud, and I needed 5 minutes of quiet. She sat beside me, handed me a cup of tea, and said, "I used to think my job was to protect you from pain. Turns out my job was to love you through it. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." I rested my head on her shoulder and said, "You got there exactly when I needed you to." She kissed my hair and whispered, "Look at us now." The church we'd grown up in never really welcomed me back. Too much scandal, too many elders still believed I should have submitted harder. But a funny thing happened. People started leaving. Not in a dramatic exodus with pitchforks, but quietly, one family at a time. Women who'd read my book, men who'd watched their wives light up for the first time in years. They started meeting in living rooms on Sunday nights, drinking coffee out of real mugs, talking about grace without shame as a side dish. Last spring, they asked if I'd come speak on Mother's Day. I said yes on one condition: no corsages, no godly womanhood talk, just truth. 300 people showed up in a living room built for 50. We dragged in folding chairs and sat on the floor. I told them about the Thanksgiving, about learning to leave, about Ruth sleeping upstairs in a pack and play while her daddy sang her Landslide off key. I told them God never once asked me to stay in a burning house just because I'd signed the mortgage in his name. Afterward, an elder's wife I'd known my whole life pulled me aside, eyes red, and said, "I've been married 38 years. If I'd had your courage at 33, I might have left at 34. Thank you for doing what I couldn't." I hugged her and said, "You're doing it now. That's what matters." This past Thanksgiving, we went back to my parents' house one last time before they downsized. The dining room table had an extra leaf and 3 high chairs pushed up to it now: Ruth, Ellie, and Sarah's new baby boy. Dad prayed like he always does, voice cracking on "Thank you for redemption," and Mom added her own line, "And thank you for daughters who teach us how to be braver than we were." When the plates were piled high and the kids were sticky with pie, my dad stood up, cleared his throat, and said he had an announcement. He pulled out a small velvet box, opened it, and inside was the diamond from my grandmother's engagement ring reset into a simple gold band. He said, "I was going to give this to you on your first wedding day, but I think it belongs to the marriage you chose, not the one you were sold." He handed it to Ben, who slid it onto my right hand next to the rose gold band he'd given me years ago. 2 rings, 2 stories, 1 woman. I lost it completely. Snot, ugly cry, the whole thing. Ruth stared at me like I'd grown a second head from her high chair, then threw a green bean at me in solidarity. Later that night, after the babies were asleep and the house was quiet, Ben and I stood on my parents' back porch under the same stars where everything shifted years ago. He wrapped his arms around my very soft, still healing postpartum body and said, "Still glad you already had yours?" I looked at the sty, then at the faint scar on my abdomen where they'd pulled our daughter out, then at the 2 rings catching the moonlight on my hand. More than ever. Because the first one taught me what I deserved, this one proved I was right to demand it. He kissed me slow and sweet, the kind of kiss that still makes my knees forget their job, and whispered, "Happy sequel-versary, babe." Inside, the family we'd pieced back together, stronger at every broken place, was laughing about something I couldn't hear yet. Ruth would probably wake up in an hour needing to nurse. My boobs already hurt in anticipation. My mother was likely sneaking pie straight from the fridge with a fork, like she's done since 1985. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt the full weight of a truth I never dared believe before. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not fixed, not finished, just whole. So if you're sitting at a family table this year, staring at turkey and dread, waiting for the inevitable question, hear me. You do not owe anyone a performance of healing. You do not owe anyone a second wedding to prove the first one wasn't a waste. You only owe yourself the life you were too afraid to demand the first time around. Say it with me, even if it's just a whisper in the bathroom with the fan on so no one hears. I already had mine, and I'm still here, and that is enough. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive the story they said would ruin you, and then turn around and tell it on it. Thank you for letting me tell mine on you. Now go tell yours on the world. They're ready when you are.